Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had an encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. For tonight's show, we're going to welcome Casey Brannen back to the show. Casey, welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to be back, Vic.
It's great having you back. As most of you will remember, Casey was our guest for episode 140 2 weeks ago. For the listeners who haven't listened to that episode, Casey, please tell them about yourself and why you were a guest on that show.
I'm a native Floridian. I've lived here most of my life. I had an encounter, something I'll never forget. I actually witnessed it firsthand. I had Dogman actually climb up and face us in the other direction. Luckily, I had a fire build at the time, and I honestly believe it hindered the process of it doing whatever it was going to do. It went the other way, so this is kind of a continuance in a way, but a new story in itself.
Oh, I'd say it is. Less than 2 weeks ago, you took your family back to the campsite where you had that encounter you told us about on episode 140. Not long after sundown, you had another incident, and that's what you're here to tell us about. Before we get into that, though, I want to talk about some other things. From what I hear, a lot of changes have been made to the area where you had your encounter since you were on the show 2 weeks ago. Please tell us about those changes.
As far as the changes go, there's a lot of different directions you can go in hiking the trails. If I'm not mistaken, it's about 160 acres of forest that you travel through. They have actually taken and put boardwalk down on most of the trails, so you never have to step on dirt. It goes from boardwalk to concrete. Some of the platforms, viewing platforms for some of the higher elevations, they've put, I guess you would say, a cage wire over the boardwalk that you walk on. So not only does it have sides, it's almost like being in a zoo. You walk around and you kind of got somewhat of an enclosure between you and nature. They did a lot of different things building it up since I've been there, and I'd say that the first time I seen the place was about 5 years ago. I fell in love with it because of its natural beauty, not so much the elevation, because I didn't really go for that reason. When we go camping, we scout it out and make sure it's kid-friendly. The people that go there are nice. A lot of things go into consideration when picking a site. We picked the place because it was beautiful, man. It was absolutely gorgeous. One of the perks of going there is some beautiful water and some sinkholes. And when I say sinkholes, I don't mean, just little pines or holes in the bottom of trees. I mean, it's literal areas that would swallow a building. You can't really see the bottom to them. Some of the smaller ones that look like they were dug with a shovel, I mean, if you want to call it a sinkhole, they're visible there. To the other side where the sinkholes are, they're actually roped off with caution tape. And it has been that way since the first time we were there. Now, the first time we went there, I had no idea of what a Dogman was. Never thought I would be talking about an experience that I had physically seeing it. So, anyway, the area has never been touched since. It's still got caution tape, do not enter signs. So you can walk and view the sinkholes, quote unquote, but you're only going to get a couple of feet to that direction before you have to turn around and go back the other way. And I have my own thoughts and theories to why that is and why they poured so much money in enclosing the areas that you walk around the landscape. I have some of an idea of what that would be.
You know about places around that area where you think Dogman might be holing up. What can you tell us about that?
There's areas that in broad daylight I would not venture close to. I sent you a few pictures, Vic, because I wanted to give you an idea of what I was physically seeing. This is 12 o'clock noon in Florida, man. It's hot. And you're looking over your shoulder. You don't really want to hang out in the middle of the day over there. The caution tape, yeah. The keep out tape, yeah. Don't go. But just the look of it from walking up to it tells you to go the other way. I mean, like we've spoken before, everybody has a sense about them that knows the sense of danger from children to adults. And it just fills you with a sense of danger. Now, if you veer to the right of that, you're in the most beautiful place you've ever seen. Water puddles, waterfalls, lakes. It's beautiful. It is like a postcard. If you turn to the right, you're going into a horror movie. And I believe that. I believe that's where they're at. I believe that's where they live, and I believe that's why it's roped off and it's never been worked on.
In some of those pictures that you sent me, it does look beautiful, just like you said, but other parts and places that you showed me pictures of, it's got keep out written all over it.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to stumble over there on a dark night, much less going in the daytimes enough to scare the pants off of you. It's really undescribable. It's a place that has a lot of paranormal activity. If you speak to different people, it's a place that there's been a lot of deaths there from things that were done in the past, the reputation of the place. You can talk to anybody and get a different story from every person, but every one of them points over there and says, don't go over there. The sinkholes are massive. They're dark. Bats are flying in and out of them. It's just eerie. And I was taught at a young age to steer clear of stuff that was eerie, and I try to do so.
Well, it definitely fits the eerie bill. Yeah, it's a pretty creepy looking place. Last time around, Casey, people were wondering why we didn't come out and mention the name of the place. Please address that now.
A lot of people were actually asking in the comments of the location, but I was raised, and I still am, and maybe it's not right, but I was always raised to not talk bad about people and talk bad about things. This campsite, I can honestly say I will never go back. And the reason why we went back, it was to the other side of the campsite, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I was raised not to talk bad about people or talk down on people. And I feel like if I give the location and the name of this place, a lot of people are going to go there for the negative reasons. And I said it in the first interview that I don't want anybody to not go into nature and enjoy the beauty of it. I just want them to understand and be on their toes when they do. You know, whether it's a feral hog or whatever, there's stuff out there, and it's badder than you are.
Oh, I'd say it is. And that's an admirable reason for not sharing the name of the place, by the way.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, Casey, please tell us about this experience you had this time around. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Well, this experience that we had this time around was kind of a wild experience, and the experience started with going camping during spring break. The month of March everywhere, everybody's hauling butt to come to the big cities, and everybody in the big cities hauling butt to get in the country. Anyway, we went to 11 places to go camping. 0 camper sites was available. And maybe we ran out of luck, and maybe we pushed our luck thinking that if we kept trying, something would come available. We would go on the website Reserve America every so many hours just to see if we could get a place that was available. Nothing ever was. The only place we knew we had reservations is where we previously made them before we had our first encounter at the same location. And it was a tent site, not a site to where I bought a camper to keep us away from stuff like that. So I'm saying, no, we're not going camping. My wife is agreeing with me. Until it comes time to go camping, and we have 3 kids, you know, pouting because they want to bring their buddies camping, and they don't necessarily know how serious it was. They have a feeling, and I told them, and it scared them for that time, but everybody tells you the stove's hot until you touch it, you know. So anyway, I start kind of believing my own hype, and I'm like, hey, if I get a campsite on the other side of the park, that's almost in another county. I know it's not going to be in the outdoors, and it'll be a little hike to everything, but at least we're camping. At least we're outside. At least we have a lake during the daytime, and we can have a good time. So I really took into consideration a lot of things, but unfortunately we ended up back at the same spot. Me thinking lightning wouldn't strike twice in the same place was probably the dumbest decision that I've ever made. And I've been told that by a few people. Anyway, so we're getting the campsite. We have it reserved. we call the place and tell them that we would like to switch locations. They have what they call a walk-up site to where we can walk up to it and basically camp there. It's not as nice as the other sites. There's actually a asphalt or pavement area, and the only ground is where you set up your tent at. I mean, it's really like camping in the parking lot of a store. So anyway, we were going to do it. You know, it's marshmallow and s'mores time. We're going to have fun. We're going to enjoy ourselves. So it was me, my wife, my 3 children, and 2 of their little friends. And the first day we went, man, it was just like advertised. It was the most beautiful place on earth, and you seen the most friendly people. Everybody smiled. Everybody offered to help. There are no strangers. Everybody in there waves and says hello. It's a really nice place. And anyway, we stayed. It was beautiful. It was perfect. Perfect enough for me to let my guard down. And I'll explain that further too. I'm getting so comfortable now that it's like, hey, maybe whatever we seen was the hallucination. Maybe I was losing my mind. My wife starts chuckling, saying, yeah, don't act like that, you know, blah, 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 you know, how husband and wife do. Anyway, the kids come out, and it's our last night there. And I told the kids, I said, look, guys, let's try s'mores. Let's drink some cocoa. I was pretty much bribing them to hang out under the stars because that's what we go for. And this time I messed up and brought a DVD player with a bunch of movies on it. And they wanted to go watch some new movies. Anyway, I talked them into hanging out by the fire. And the way that I talked them into it is I was like, look, we're here, baby. We're across the park. There's nothing to worry about. Everything out here better worry about us. I'm pointing to my son and grabbing his muscle, you know. And anyway, about the time that I tell them, hey, there's nothing to worry about, not thinking about the boogers in the woods, I tell them, hey, if we were down there fishing and you caught a fish and it was so big that you needed his help, what would you do? And the other kid said, I would help him. And I said, okay, you 2 are fishing and you guys catch a fish and you guys need some help reeling it in. What would you do? And my daughter says, I would help him. I said, see, now everybody's fishing and it's dark. There's nothing to worry about. They kind of laughed, you know, and agreed with me. I got the marshmallow sticks out, and about that time, man, a tree, not a branch, not a twig, not a small limb, not the top of a tree. I do landscape, and I can tell when it's a dead limb falling and when it's a green limb falling. It was a tree that cracked in half, and it was green, full of chlorophyll. It was a healthy tree that snapped, and it was so loud that it was probably louder than a shotgun. My neighbor in a camper comes out and says, are you guys okay? We were like, yeah, you know, and it sounded like it was right behind our campsite. So, you know, I'm tripping out. My kids are like, keep your marshmallows. They're going in the tent. I looked at my wife and I'm trying to say, oh, it's okay. In the meantime, I ease over there and grab my pocket knife up out of my chair. And, the kids are gone. They've heard enough. They don't want any marshmallows. They could care less. So they go in the tent and play their movies, and I'm talking with my wife, and I'm like, look, man, that was trip. At this point, I did not think it was something. I thought it was just a freak thing, a tree breaking. And I told my wife, I was like, wow, that was a trip, talking about perfect timing. It was like something was listening to us. So probably a few more hours go by, and now it's getting a little after midnight. Me and my wife are relaxing by the fire. And the sound that I had heard the first time that I told you I had heard, that was unlike any sound that I've ever heard. If I had to say it's some demonic growl or a terrible sound. And as close as I can get to it again is, and, you know, you guys can laugh about it, but just imagine that played through an amplifier 100 times louder. So anyway, I hear that noise and I'm like, no way. And my eyes are about the size of saucers, and I look at my wife and she's looking at me, and I said, dude, that's the same noise we heard last time. And it did it again. This time it was about 50 feet from where it did it the first time. It went from the left of me to in front of me directly in the woods. And a third time to the right of me directly in the woods. And for the final time down by the lake. And I'm like, dude, this is crazy, man. I should record this. Anyway, everybody wishes they had a camera, I guess, sometimes. So we hear hear this noise, and I'm freaking out. My wife's kind of freaking out. She's freaking out because I'm freaking out, but I'm playing it cool, you know. And I was like, maybe it was, I don't know what it is. I was like, if I hear it again, I'm going to shine this light on it, and I want you to walk back that way. If I see it, I can say what it is. So my wife went and got her keys, and she has a newer car to where it has an alarm on it, pushes a button from anywhere at all, not just a distance, the alarm will go off. So in the meantime, we're sitting there and we hear these dogs barking throughout the campsite. And my wife says to me, after a couple of more hours pass and we're still up, that's weird. You hear these dogs barking? And it was almost like all the way as far around the campground as you can get at this campsite. One dog would bark, and it was like a bigger bark. And then on the other side of the campsite, another dog would bark. And finally, the neighbor's dog that was beside us, that was in a camper, a little chihuahua, started raising Cain. It was just barking, 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 barking. And my wife looks at me, and I kind of look over behind our tent, and I was like, that's weird. So I throw some extra gasoline on the fire and get it blazing up pretty decent. And about that time, man, I would say 50 yards directly in front of me. Now, the way that this campsite is set up, if I'm sitting facing the steering wheel in a car and you reach over and touch the passenger side dash, that's where the tent is. The wood line would be directly in front of your hood. We had a little tent going over the picnic table, and the woods were directly behind it. The fire pit is directly in front of me and my wife, and we're facing the woods. Anyway, about 50 yards from the tree line, I hear something coming through the woods. And when I say something coming through the woods, it wasn't a deer or even a bear or something that I could understand. Whatever was coming through the woods directly toward us was coming through the woods nonstop, over saplings, over trees, over whatever, like a truck, like a small truck is what you would think it was without a motor in it, because it didn't make any sound. There was no sounds except trees and ground and grass tearing up. My wife jumps up beside me. She has a big mag flashlight. I stand up. Now, as I stand up, she's to the left of me by the fire, and I'm directly behind the fire looking out in the woods. As I stand up, she takes off from the left side of me. As I go to stand up completely, she knocks me completely over on the ground. Hits me with the flashlight by accident, but either way, she's getting out of there. Has her finger on the alarm button. As I land on a stack of firewood. And I reached down and grabbed a piece of firewood, and I was so mad that I could have just busted it in my hand, it felt like. Well, I stood up and threw it directly into the woods, straight to where the sound was coming from. I didn't intend on hitting a tree, but I did. I hit a big tree that was in front of the tree line. It hit the tree, and it again sounded like a gunshot. It was loud. Pow! And as soon as the wood hit the ground, the sound stopped. It was like whatever was coming hit its brakes. It ran full speed, a 50-yard dash, and stopped directly in front of the woods to where we could not see it. So now I'm freaking out. I'm like, dude, not this again. This is the craziest thing ever. This is like Twilight Zone, man. I mean, I was really debating on even calling you and telling you this because, for one, world's dumbest campers, you know what I'm saying? For two, it was the reality. And it burned a hole in my mind for a few days until I did tell you about it. But anyway, I was like, look, gather the kids' stuff up. Now it's like 2, 3, maybe 4 in the morning. I said, gather the kids' stuff up. It's getting late. She's like, well, it's almost daylight. It'll be daylight by the time we even lay down. Let's just lay down in the tent. So I go over and grab a big lighter knot, throw it on the fire, get the fire blazing up the size of it. It was big. You probably could have seen it from outer space, if you can imagine. Fire's blazing. We go lay down in the tent. And as you can probably figure, I couldn't just fall asleep. My wife's over here snoring, and I'm barely able to go to sleep. I just closed my eyes, it felt like, for a split second. I didn't wake up and see what time it was, but a light rain had started right before we decided to lay down. maybe it was dew and humidity falling, but it wasn't. You would have to stand outside in it to get soaked. Okay, you would have to be standing in one spot to let this rain saturate you. So anyway, I get a little sleep, a doze off, maybe I would say 45-minute-ish. I wake up and I smell wet dog. Now, it could have been a bear, a deer, a raccoon, a cat, a possum, but it was wet fur. As if you took your dog and put it in the bathtub, and anybody that's listening to this that has ever washed a dog, the smell of wet dog is the smell of wet dog. There is no other smell that smells like a wet dog. So the smell is so thick that I'd like to say you could cut it with a knife because I slept with about 5 of them. But anyway, it was so thick that it kept the tent full of the smell. And I reach over and shake my wife, and I'm like, hey, do you smell that? She's like, what? I said, do you smell that? She sniffs around and just agrees with me and goes back to sleep. So now I'm on guard. I smell wet dog, and I stayed up until the sun come up, and we gathered up our things and left. I haven't told the kids about it because, you know, the first time I told them about the incident, it sucked. It was hard to do. And the second time, I don't really necessarily have to tell them because, honestly, I didn't see anything. But we will never be back there. And I don't think that I will ever go camping again in a tent. That's my word. That's all I got. And that's what I can give you.
At this point, Casey, I'll bet most of the listeners are wondering the same thing I am. Why didn't you leave right away?
It was one of those things, man. It was so peaceful and beautiful. And this noise, I was like, all right, I'm going to figure out what this is. The next time it makes this noise, you know, there's not going to be a next time. Because I honestly think, I'm sure a lot of people went back to the site of incidents, maybe for closure for themselves or maybe for others, but I felt like I was safe. I felt like it was the safest thing in the world because of where we were. We were almost in a part of the campground that was almost like a small town. And for something to come over there, it had to sneak behind everything that was there and come over. And I think these things are so smart that they have the capability of smelling you, finding you, and once they find you, listening to what you say. Because if I would have had a recorder, and I could have recorded what I told my kids and had them just about ready to throw some marshmallows on the fire, and then the tree break that started off the chain of events that seemed like happened back to back to back, I would have never believed it. I would have never even imagined in a million years that it could happen. But I learned my lesson, I guess you would say, the hard way. So why didn't I leave? I guess maybe, I don't know, I wanted to wait till the sun come up. What was worse, waiting until the sun come up or waking the kids up and terrifying them and piling in a vehicle and not knowing what would have happened or whatever. So I just played it by ear and woke up the next morning and we packed up. I will say we left as soon as the sun crept up, though.
Well, I'm glad you learned your lesson and don't plan on going back. Thank goodness. You do realize a lot of people are going to be talking about you for going back, don't you?
Yeah, but, you know, like my daddy told me, I've heard worse from better people. I'm sure that a lot of people went back to the site for closure themselves, whether they went back during the day, whether they went back in a vehicle with the doors locked. I can't say that I felt threatened for my life this time. I felt safe for some reason. Maybe it was because the guard station was within, hey, I'm over here away. You know what I mean? So there's really no one reason why I went back other than there were no open sites available for the time period that I had to take my kids camping. And that's pretty much why we went.
I can see why you did it. When I found out that you had done it, though, I've got to admit, I was shaking my head thinking, what was he doing? What was he thinking? But I'm not in your situation. I'm not in your shoes. So I can't think for you. All I can do is just wish you the best whenever you do anything like that. I'm glad you got out of that situation unscathed.
Yeah, what a lot of people don't know is Vic actually called me after I wrote this to him. And I did not write it to Vic right after it happened because it's almost like me walking into a telephone pole and going and getting stitches, and then when I get out of the hospital, walking into the other side of the telephone pole. we stayed at the campground, and I can say that it's a good mile, maybe mile and a half from the other site we stayed in. And I thought maybe that would be enough to keep us safe as far as the distance. But after Vic had called me and explained to me about the distance they can travel, it was more or less like closure on, okay, yeah, all I have to do is shake my head, admit defeat, and know that I'll never be back there, period, with a camper or not.
It is amazing their ability to track people over huge distances. Distances a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, I'll never doubt anybody's story ever again. But another thing, man, I want listeners to know, these things, I think they have the capability to listen to your words. Now, that may be strange, and you may say, yeah, even a dog can hear you, but to be able to understand it with a consciousness, to be able to understand what we are saying, because as if I was in a horror movie or someone was in the woods, it played out just like that. Like they listened to the words I said. They listened and waited for my location to be at certain spots. It was weird. It was just a strange thing. It was like being watched without physically seeing somebody watching you. In the first story I told you, I felt like somebody was watching me, and then it all summed up to this creature in the first go-round at episode 140. And even since episode 140, I went online and did a lot of research, even more research. I think I'll do it until I'm gone, just to try to get closure, to see if I can see what I saw again. You know, whether it's in another state now or whatever, or if it's in the same spot, if there's more than one. But yeah, it's a wild story, man. I wouldn't really believe it if I wouldn't have lived it. I mean, the reservations were just dangling over my head like, you're going through all this trouble and can't get anywhere. The kids are going to be upset. Just go here. And I took the bait. But now I have to live with it.
Well, one good thing I think we can take away from that last experience you had is the fact that your kids didn't even know about what had happened. If they had known about what had happened this time around, that might have put them off from the woods for their whole lives. We don't know that, but I think there's a pretty good possibility of that happening.
Yeah, I know I'm not going to know the back of my hand, and that's why I said in the first episode, man, when you have to explain to kids that monsters are real, kids have an innocence about them that is beautiful, and that innocence is gone too soon these days. So I try to do everything I can do to keep my kids as innocent as I can keep them, regardless of what it is. I want them to be kids as long as they can be kids, and I want them to enjoy life. And that's why the first episode, it was almost, it's hard to describe, but it was harder explaining to them what I had seen than the encounter almost, because they're my heart. So that was hard. So this go around, I got them up, we got out of there. There were no hollering, no alarm went off. Daddy had a bump on his head from a flashlight. We laughed about that, but that was about it.
Well, I can understand why you explaining what had happened the first time around to your kids was so hard, because it only makes sense that when you're explaining what happened to them, you don't want to explain it in a way that's going to make it even worse for them than it has to be.
That's correct.
Yeah, that wouldn't be easy. I'm a little fuzzy on something. How long ago did you say it was when you and your family had that first encounter?
The first encounter, I would say easily a year ago. I remember specifically going around Easter. So we were there, we stayed, we went on while we were there and made the reservations for this last March trip. And who knows what the future holds or whatever, and at that time I had no idea. But we made the reservations a year ago, and the first encounter was a year ago. Maybe a little longer, give or take a few days, but I would say a good year.
It's been quite a while then.
Yeah, it wasn't fresh in my head, man, but even as I listened to my own episode, it kind of made my palms sweat. A lot of things come back to mind about that time, and the hardest part is not being able to understand it. I don't understand what they were after. I don't understand what their intentions were. I believe if they were going to do harm, they would have. And the reason why I keep saying they is because above all, I believe there's more than one.
Talking about what you just mentioned, did it sound like there might have been more than one creature out there in the woods that night?
If not, this joker was huge. I mean, I would say that it was the sound of a pack of dogs running through the woods. I'm not saying there were 7 or 8, but I'm saying that, man, if you were to stand up and put 10-foot long 2x4 in your arms and run through a cornfield, knocking over 4 or 5 rows of corn on each side of you, that's how it sounded, with the stomps and steps. And as soon as it got to the tree line, I threw the wood and it hit the tree. I don't think that stopped it. I think maybe me yelling and the neighbor's dog raising Cain, I believe that may have opened its eyes. I don't know. Maybe it was just there to scare me. Maybe it was there to say, hey, you think your first encounter was crazy, nobody will believe this. I don't know. I have no idea.
It probably is what was going on, because if it wanted to come in and take you out, there wasn't anything to stop it from doing that.
Yeah, me and my wife both were standing there. She's on the other side of the tent by the back door. The back door of the tent is put directly with access to the car. You unzip the back, you're in the back seat. I already set that up. So we were both standing there waiting to see something. Whether we seen something look at us growling, whether something ripped our tent shack or whatever you want to call it that goes over the picnic table down, I was waiting on a monster to come out of the woods, and nothing ever did. I mean, I didn't even hear it run back into the woods. So whatever it was stealthy. I'll say that. And like my first encounter, I visually seen it. And as soon as I seen it and it took off, that was it. It isn't like I followed it out of distance. Within seconds, it was a memory. And a pretty vivid, scary one at that.
Oh, I'm sure it did leave memories for you. How could it not? How close did you say the closest campers were to you when you heard those sounds in the woods?
Well, I would say that when we got there to set up the first night that we stayed there one full night, and it was beautiful, perfect. And the second night, which was the last, we were out of there like swimwear. Anyway, when we got there, it was about an hour before dark. The sun was setting. I actually took pictures of the sunset on the way in. And the reason why it was that late is because we had spent up to the last minute trying to find another campground to go to. We probably, and this is no exaggeration, made 50 phone calls. I beat every trail and path available to go to, and there was nothing. So we were stuck with it. Either go or don't. So we did. And when we went, we set up. The neighbor to us was approximately 20 foot away. And that don't sound like very far in case of an emergency. But yeah, I'd say 20 foot behind me, and probably the guard station that you drive through to get there was another, say, 45 foot to the other side. Open view, nothing but concrete and asphalt until behind us.
It sounds like you had company right up on you then.
Yeah, and that was the whole idea. If we're going to go and camp at the edge of the park. If you're camping and you see a gator on the side of a lake, the next time you go to that lake, I bet you'll show up on the other side of the lake, unless that's your thing, then you might go hang out with it. But people tend to avoid dangerous things. And I went this time strictly for my kids to have a good time. I did not go fishing. I did not do anything myself. I went strictly for my kids to swim in the lake, to fish themselves, to play, to look at nature, to see the sights that were available to be seen, and have a good time. That's what I went for. That was the whole reason in going. The whole reason we went there was for them. And people may say it's crazy because of the first encounter, but if these things are going to come out where it came out at or ran up to, it never came out. It just ran up to the tree line, and I was waiting on it to come out. Or I say I was waiting on it to come out. It might have looked like I sat in a chair full of Hershey Kisses if it did come out. But I am positive that they were listening to what I was saying, because I was giving my kids a motivational speech, you know. The boogeyman looks under his bed for me at night. And it was like it was saying, oh, really? Okay. And then the chain of events started. So, yeah, it went from a perfect scenario as I pictured it being first day to the last night there. I mean, even to the sun, right at sundown, it was perfect, man. all except them roasting marshmallows and drinking hot chocolate.
Does the boogeyman really look under his bed for you at nighttime, or what?
If he doesn't, he better start, because he's starting to make me mad. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I could see. It would have been a great time if that whatever it was didn't come back and ruin the fun. I've got no doubts it was a Dogman. I mean, after that first experience you had, what else could it be? But it's really a shame. It would have been a great time.
Yeah, they still had fun, man. They have no idea. They were excited about it. They were bragging about their little fish they caught. We do a lot of catch and release and a couple of bass, and I teach them how to make little fish traps out of basically trash, a little water bottle. We cut it, make a little minnow trap, and they catch minnows and let them go. I mean, it's just a wonderful time, man. I mean, for innocence and watching your kids have fun and not have a worry in the world is priceless. There's no money that can buy that. And they did. They had a good time. They had exactly what I intended them to have. And if I would have woke them up and told them, come on, let's go, we're going to get to eat, I mean, I imagine that would have changed quick. They'd probably still be under the blankets in the house right now.
Oh, I'm sure they would.
We're still going to go camping, but it's probably going to be in the backyard or the front yard. We'll probably go camping, man. I'm going to look into buying a piece of property and having it just for us to do these type of things out. To buy a piece of rural property, maybe lakefront. It just varies, but on the other side of town from that, you can be sure of that.
Well, that'd be nice to have your own camping spot.
Yeah, we've discussed it. And I even went to the courthouse to look for leases and everything with the hunting season that just ended the year and everything that's going on. They didn't have anything that what I would call kid friendly. I like to have a good time too, but I like to keep my kids safe and away from drinking and guns and stuff like that. And unfortunately, sometimes the best place to go is a state park where all of that is monitored to where they can have a great time and be children. You can do all that stuff at the house. I don't understand why people like to go and show out, but anyway, to each his own.
Yeah, it is a shame, but that is. How far did you say that place is from the nearest developed area? I think you addressed that on the last show you did, episode 140, but I forgot if you did mention that.
Well, it depends on which way you go. If you go from my house to there, which is basically through the woods, and you come out at the entrance 45 miles from me, and I'm 22 miles from the city. If you're there going to the next developed place, I mean, like I say, again, it varies. There's small subdivisions in between, but 30 miles, 15 miles, depending on what size that you're speaking of. I mean, there's big plantation homes and stuff like that around it. And some of the park rangers actually have homes on the outside of it. But there's nothing really built up until you get to the other side of the city. And that's a pretty decent little trek.
Yeah, I'll bet it is. And it sure sounds to me like there's a lot of competition for camping spots where you live.
Yeah, there is. I mean, like I said, it's a rarity to find a place that has a children's area, a little park, pavilion, bathrooms and family bathrooms, a swimming hole, a fishing hole. I mean, you go in these state parks and you read them, you can go hiking and camp, but you can't fish, you can't swim. I mean, the mosquitoes down here get so big they can pull your pants leg up and bite you on the kneecap. So, you want to jump in the lake. So we try to go somewhere that has all them amenities, buddy, and everybody's trying to get there.
Did your wife give you a hard time for taking the family back there after having that second experience?
After it was said and done or prior to going?
Either one.
Well, prior to going, we were both on the fence. It was like, she's the one that brought it up to me. We still have these reservations, and I was like, I don't care. And as time got shorter, I was just confident that something would come open for 2 days. But I guess in the middle of March, I'm not a spring breaker, but I guess everybody goes at that time. I don't know. There was nowhere to go. So I said, the heck with it. We'll go and we'll bite the bullet and we'll be right here at the officer station. If something happens, they'll have surveillance on our tails, And anyway, after it was said and done, she just, like me, it's almost unbelievable. And you had given us, actually when I wrote you, she didn't even know I had wrote you. And I had wrote you and kind of give you a summary of what happened, and she was still in the shock stages of not denial, but dude, this is crazy. Like the episode that you told me to listen to, I went and listened to, and it was actually a 2-part episode. And I listened to the first part of it, and it was almost identical to ours. And then the next episode was similar too. It was wild. It really was. If I would have listened to that episode first, I would have known. You know what I mean? But that was a good episode. I believe it's him and his wife or his girlfriend. But yeah, that was a good episode. And what was trippy about it is I text you all this, or some of it, and then I listen to the episode, and like 40% is identical. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he tripped and fell, but he did it on his own accord, and I got cracked side the head with a flashlight, so I guess it was similar in that way.
Yeah, there were a lot of similarities. There was a really nice lady, Pamela. That's not his wife, that's just a good friend of his. Pamela was featured on those 2 shows with Kirk as well.
Yeah, that's what it was. I want the viewers to know that you actually called me, and I want to say consoled me. You were like, dude, it'll be okay, I understand. I could sit here and ask you why you did it, but you did it, you went, you're out, and you're okay. That's all that matters. Now I want you to go listen to these 2 episodes and then let me know what you think. You were really there for support, and I appreciate that. I want fans of your show to know that. You're a good person, buddy.
Well, thanks for the good words, but yeah, that's what I do. That's what I'm here for. I just wanted to try and help you get better after that second experience.
I think I've said it before, man, but it was like getting struck by lightning and then going standing in the same spot, getting struck twice. Lightning doesn't strike twice in my tail. It definitely did. And it was the farthest thing from my mind. Like I say, it was trippy, man. It was crazy. It was an eye-opener, and it was different. It was everything that you can describe as crazy as it could be is what it was. And it was definitely a learning experience. And it was the one that gave me my degree, because now I'll never, ever go back there. I don't care if they have free camping there. They won't have me there.
Yeah, I'm glad you did learn that lesson. After these experiences, your wife decided to research Dogman on her own, and when she did, she found out about another woman who had an encounter in that very same park. Please tell us what she found out about that woman's encounter.
My wife, it was like a light bulb going off in my head. They had put all this money into this property, but they never fixed the area where you can walk around the sinkholes. Like they were avoiding you from being able to go view them. Like they knew what was out there, especially with the enclosed docks. So this lady goes, and she's planning on doing some future endeavors as far as hiking the Appalachian trails. And she said that she found this state park and she wanted to go there, and she knew that if she could hike this state park, that she'd have it pretty much whooped. If she couldn't, that it was going to whoop her. Well, upon walking around it, she got about a mile into her trip and said she felt something following her out of the corner of her eye. She said she took a step and it would take a step. And she would speed up and it would speed up. So finally she stopped, and to her horror, she turned around and looked, and it leaned out from behind a tree. And she said the only description that she could give of it, it looked like it was wearing some type of hood. And that was just in the last couple of days that was in the news. And it was actually a link that someone had sent my wife after hearing about our last camping trip. Because a lot of people here, they want to go to these places until they really find out about it. They find out the bad side of things and they don't want to go. And that's honestly why I didn't want to name the place, because there's a lot of people that aren't going there because of me. And I don't want that. I'm not saying I want somebody to go get hurt, but I want everybody to enjoy nature. Just be safe. Keep an eye and an ear out.
I wasn't there, so I don't know this is what happened to her, but most canine-type dogmen have a pronounced hump on their backs. Maybe she saw that dogman's hump sticking up over its head and mistook that hump for some kind of a hood. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened for sure. I don't know what she saw, but That is a possibility. If you go to the new website, dogmanencounters.com, and look at the Dogman on the homepage, you'll notice how you can see its hump over the top of its head. If the lighting is just right, maybe you would mistake that hump for being some kind of a hood.
Yeah, that sounds very credible. I mean, really, if you think about it, the last thing you're going to be really paying attention to is what type of hood it's wearing. You know what I mean? You're going to be staring at its facial features. And she said that she seen two big eyes, and it looked like it was wearing some type of hood, so it very well could have been that. But I definitely heard the same sound that I had heard the first time, the second time. And when that happened, you could have heard a pin drop. It got my attention.
That really does cut down on the possibilities of what it could have been out there in the woods that night.
Yes, it does. It kind of narrows my theory down to what it was, and I honestly believe that it was just kind of listening to me and messing with me. It was letting me know that it was boss, and I could act tough all I wanted to, but I think it had my scent, my smell, and wanted to play a few games, I guess you could say. But if it wanted dinner, it would have kept coming. I do believe that.
Oh yeah, just wanted to intimidate you. It sure sounds to me like mission accomplished.
Yeah, it definitely did. Did a great job.
Yeah, I'd say it did. Before we have you give your closing comments, Casey, I hear your youngest daughter thinks I'm a dog man. Is that true?
Yeah, she just thinks it's the cutest thing. She tells everybody that she sees that her daddy is on Dogman counters. She doesn't pronounce it quite right, but it's even cuter that way. But yeah, we talk to Dogman counters, and he's cute. He's a cute doggy. And my older two, also, I showed them the picture, and they kind of looked at me and laughed and knew that I was pulling their leg. But when I showed them your picture of your Dogman, my baby daughter really thinks that's what you look like. And my kids are taught not to make fun of people. And they were talking so sweet about you, Vic, so you don't have to worry about them, I guess.
Well, they are great kids. Before we did that first show, I talked to your kids, and I got a really good feel for the great job you did raising them. I'm not surprised, though. I could tell right from the bat that you're a great dad.
I sure do appreciate that, Vic. You know, a lot of the comments on the first video were, why didn't you get your kids out of there? Why didn't you this? And why didn't you that? You know, if I were going to be dead, I would have been dead. I don't think that it was a life or death situation. You know, it scared the tar out of me, I guess, as anybody. That's why we come on here and we have this type of counseling, this type of outlet to go on. But I don't want anybody to think that I'd ever let anything happen to my kids. I mean, honestly, I may not be bad, but bad don't mess with me. They'd have to come through Daddy first. That's a given.
Oh, I can tell you'd do anything to protect those kids, so anybody who would think that you would allow anything to happen to them intentionally, that's just crazy. But having said that, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
I'd like to say thanks for you, Vic. I'd like for everyone to go. If you haven't already done it, then you need to go do it. Download the Dogman app and listen to the shows commercial free. The new episode airs every Friday night. I think it's 9 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. And that's pretty much it, Vic.
I need to put you on the payroll. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to my uncle, if you don't mind. My uncle Danny Brannen, he passed away the other day, and I'd like to say that we love him and all of our family. And I appreciate you letting me come on, Vic, and tell the rest of my story. There's still a lot of stuff that's not told, you know, including the location, but I hope I give the viewers a decent picture and a decent idea of everything that happened.
Just like first time around, you painted a great picture again, so don't worry about that. And about your uncle, God bless him. I'm so sorry to hear about that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, thanks again so much for sharing that experience with us. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Vic. You have a great night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.